welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Fospero. This week's guest caught the world's attention when she sat down in her kitchen in Cardiff to discuss her moving story with Prince William over a cup of tea and Welsh cakes. The future king was overcome with emotion at one point as Rhian Mannings spoke openly about the double tragedy she faced in 2012. Her 33-year-old husband, Paul, died by suicide just 5 days after the couple's 1-year-old baby, George, died after a seizure, which later was discovered to be caused by bronchial pneumonia. Rhian was naturally devastated, with 2 small children to take care of. Born out of unbelievable heartbreak and the lack of support the family had to guide them through their shock and pain, Rhian set up To Wish in Paul and George's memory to help other people who suffer the sudden loss of a child or young person. Rhian met the Prince and Princess of Wales a few years ago when raising money for William, Catherine and Harry's Heads Together mental health campaign. But this meetup coincided with the couple's Royal Foundation announcing £1 million in funding to launch the National Suicide Prevention Network to change how suicide is understood and hopefully to transform prevention. And Rhian joins me now from, I think, the same kitchen in Cardiff. Rhian, it's so lovely to have you with us. It really is not often that the future king drops by for tea. Tell us how it all came about.
Thank you for having me. It was very surreal. I had an email inviting me to Windsor Castle, firstly, to meet him, which was very exciting. But a couple of days later then, the plans changed for him to come to the house. When he suggested coming to my home, I presumed it was Cardiff, not my actual house. It was amazing and surreal. And I suppose I'm still pinching myself because it was over very quickly. I still can't believe he's been here.
I can't imagine the amount of cleaning and baking that went on in advance. Did the family get involved in that?
Yeah, I had a busy day in work the day before. So my mum and sister came and cleaned to the point where my daughter rang me and said, don't come home. Everyone's a bit crazy here. And then my mum went into like typical Welsh mum mode and cooked Welsh cakes, a Victoria sponge and a coffee cake.
Just in case he didn't like one or the other.
Just in case, yeah.
And I think the Welsh cakes went down quite well with him, didn't they?
Yeah, he absolutely loved them. He took a load away with him and apparently he'd eaten them before he got to his helicopter. My mum was thrilled.
Oh, that's fantastic. Tell us what the idea was behind the interview and the filming and why it took place right now.
The Royal Foundation have donated money now towards a suicide prevention network across the 4 nations, which is absolutely amazing to bring us all together, to look at good practice, to look at what we can do to reduce the numbers. And because I'd met him before and I spoke about losing Paul by suicide, he just felt he wanted to come back and revisit that and to talk to me a bit more about Paul, about the effects of losing him by suicide and our family's journey since, really. So when he asked to come, that's what the focus was going to be. And that's really what we ended up speaking about for the majority of his visit.
Did you prepare anything in advance? How did the conversation go, Rhian?
There was no preparation at all. I had to make him a cup of tea, which was probably the most nerve-wracking bit about the whole thing. And it was awful. And then we sat down and he's just so natural. He just started asking questions and it was just like speaking to a friend around the table. And I generally mean that. So what you see on the film is literally us just chatting away. We were both emotional at times, but it was an important conversation to have. And I'm really glad that it was him I could have that open conversation with.
For those people who didn't see it, what sort of things did you want to explore and find out more about?
He wanted to understand the effect of losing your loved one by suicide, how that impacts your family. He spoke to the children as well around, what life has been like. He also wanted to talk about the stigma around suicide still, mental health, the signs, potential signs of someone really struggling with their mental health. And the question that many people saw was, if Paul was still here, what would I say to him? And that was a really emotive, it's quite a brave question to ask me, but I'm glad he did. It's really important that people heard my answer. And that was, if he'd have spoken to me, I genuinely believe we would have been okay. But I didn't have that opportunity, unfortunately.
It's rare, isn't it, that we see the royal family show emotions, but he was really choked up with tears in his eyes. And I would imagine that must have been quite a surreal experience for you, actually.
Yeah. I speak about it a lot to many people, and it does cause strong emotions, but you don't expect to have the future king sat there showing such open emotion. And also, how do you react to that? You know, he is so relaxed, but getting up, giving him a big cutch isn't potentially the right thing to do. So you do feel difficult not being able to reach out, but he actually reached out to me first and put his hand on mine, and that made things a little bit easier. But, you know, they're human. Anyone working in the public eye, especially the royal family, are in the public eye and are human and are going through their own emotions. And I just felt for him at that point, because I'm sure other things were going through his mind at the same time.
Well, of course, he's suffered loss and suffered his loss very tragically and very publicly. I get the sense, Rhian, that he really gets this subject and he really understands it and he really wants to try and make a difference.
You could just hear the passion in his voice during the interview, but afterwards, when we were stood around with my children and my mum, we were just talking about, we've got to do something about this. And he was really, really passionate about that. And he looked at the children and said, we have to, as their generation as well, we need to get behind this and talk about this. And with his experience of the rescue helicopter, and he has seen in his career, he sees the aftermath of this, which can be avoided if tackled in the right way.
How old are the children now, Rhian, and what kind of things did he chat to them about?
So my daughter, she was 18 last week, and my son's coming on 17, so they're nice and close in age. And it was a really emotional couple of days, because what you don't see is that we were interviewed for nearly 2 days by different people, and hearing the children talk about that for the first time, like we've talked about losing Paul, what life is like, how hard it is, but for them to actually say his name and the word suicide in the same sentence, as a mum, it's really difficult to hear. But they were absolutely amazing. You know, they're teenagers. They grunt at me day in, day out, but actually they were just wonderful. And he just asked them, you know, how they are. And he was very much like, you know, their dad would be very proud of them for speaking out and being part of this. And, you know, spoke about me as their mum and had a bit of a laugh with them, actually, you know, and with my mum as well. So it was really special. They didn't show any of that, which was a bit of a shame, because I think as children, for other young people to see that, it would have perhaps helped. But for me, it made me realise that it's been one hell of a journey for them as well.
Oh, and Rhian, you must have felt so proud of them, because, of course, you know, you were dealing with the loss of Paul, the loss of baby George, and you had two little people who you had to navigate that grief for and with.
Oh, I can't put into words how amazing they are. You know, they went through so much. Yes, it was a blessing they were so young in one way, because life is so innocent, and that age, they just want their own way in many, many ways. And my family were amazing. But they've also had this huge gap in their life for so long. We were also involved in a road traffic accident where someone was killed several years later, and they're so resilient. And I was so worried their lives would never be the same again, and they aren't the same again. But what is amazing, they just have turned out to be really well-rounded, maybe a bit more understanding of people's needs, because they know these things happen to people and have experienced that themselves. Don't get me wrong, they drive me up the wall plenty of times, but that's what they should be doing. And that's what I thought perhaps life would never be that normal again.
Well, it's lovely to hear that it is, and that out of so much pain and tragedy, so much good has come through the charity, which we'll talk about in a moment, and that you guys as a family can find joy and happiness too. Take us back, if you would, to 2012. On the photographs I've seen, George and Paul look like peas in a pod. Will you tell us a bit about both of them, Rhian, and their personalities and character?
Paul lit up every room. He generally did. He was the most kind and caring person. He had real presence. He was tall, handsome, absolutely adored his family and his children especially. And he had so many friends, chilled, laid back, worked hard. And yeah, he was my best friend, my husband, but my best friend, my rock, my everything. And when George, our third child, probably not our last, we wanted more children, he just came into our lives and was just joy. He didn't really have much choice, I don't think. He had to get pulled from pillar to post, but he was just so happy. He had little sticky out ears, goofy teeth. He was so happy. And we were just blessed. We took every day for granted, like you do. And we just walked around just thinking we were really, really blessed.
They did look alike, didn't they? I mean, I've seen pictures of them, and George looks like a little mini Paul to me.
They did look alike, but if you'd see Isaac, my son now, who's 17, his friends have to do a double take. He is an absolute spitting image of him. So I think the boys were going to follow Paul, and Holly apparently looks like me, which I find a massive compliment, and she definitely doesn't.
That's the same with our daughter too. People say you look like your mum. She's like, oh, disappointed. Really? George, I think he was only a year and a day when you lost him, and he looks such a smiley little chap on the photos. How did you realise, Rhian, that something wasn't quite right?
Quite instantly. He was crawling around and he always laughed and smiled before bedtime. And then he just rolled backwards onto the floor, but I knew instantly something wasn't right. So I went over to him and I could see he was breathing. His eyes were open. But when I tried to pick him up, I could just tell that this wasn't okay. So that's when I called for Paul to come in, and he agreed with me. And that's when we called an ambulance, by which time George then started to convulse on the floor of the playroom.
It must have been absolutely terrifying for you. And sadly, I think you lost him in hospital. And it turned out he'd had some kind of pneumonia, but there'd been no signs of that, had there?
Yeah, so he was taken down to the hospital, and within a couple of hours, he passed away. And the first initial results of any tests and postmortems were inconclusive. They couldn't find a cause of death, which obviously I was worried about not ever knowing. Some families never do find out. But it took 4 months for us to eventually find out he did have pneumonia and influenza A. And that came as a massive shock to us because we'd been going through those moments and hours before he fell ill, and we couldn't think of anything that we'd missed. And we had a little bit of closure. But on the other hand, as a parent, you do wonder what you must have missed. And it doesn't matter how many medical professionals, and I've met a lot who have reassured me that this can happen. And it can happen with no signs of illness at all to young children. You still, as a mum, think that you should have protected him and that you should have been aware that this is what was going to happen to you.
When that happened, Rhian, what was the support or help like from hospital or medical professions? Was there anybody there to sort of pick you up and help you deal with this overwhelming and really shocking, unexpected grief?
No. This is a simple answer. You know, when we were in hospital and he died, the nurses and doctors were phenomenal with us. They were clearly emotional. They were around us, wonderful people. But it became clear very quickly after we left the hospital that we didn't matter. And more importantly, George didn't matter. And no one reached out to us. No one put their arms around us. No one phoned us. No one gave us information. They gave me a piece of paper with phone numbers on. And I was told that they would be there for us as a family. And my family rang those phone numbers for weeks and weeks on end. And 13 years on, I am still waiting for every single person to phone us back.
Nobody should have to go through that at all. How did Paul seem to you? Because you were both trying to come to terms with that devastating loss. But in those first few hours and the day or two afterwards, how did he seem to be coping?
Gosh, I've probably reflected on these days every day for the last 13 years. And it's difficult, like you said, because his son had just died so suddenly and traumatically in front of us. So he was clearly upset. He was very upset, which you don't see your husband tend to be that upset. There were a few things that could have been avoided, mistakes made by both the hospital and the police that definitely contributed to his despair and some of his mental health, the feelings of mental health over those few days. But we talked a lot those few days. We talked about still wanting more children, going to Lapland for Christmas, making sure Holly and Isaac had the best life. So did I ever in a million years expect anything like this to happen? The answer is still no. And I go over it every day.
I'm sure you've gone over it every day, asking yourself as well, Rhian, why he did it and why you think he took his own life. And, you know, all the upset and the pain that you've just described, one would expect if one's had a loss like you have. But do you ever come to any conclusion in your mind as to why he did end up taking his own life?
Yeah, you have to come to your own sort of conclusion, because otherwise you, for the rest of your life, will always wonder. And I do genuinely believe that if we'd have had some support, if after George died that somebody had come and sat and said, everyone grieves differently, but there are things that you are going to go through, and that a lot of that will be blame, guilt. Could you have prevented this from happening? And nobody came. Nobody went through that with us. So you're left with your mind in overdrive. And I know that Paul, because he did hint at this a few times over the weekend, that he should have stopped it from happening, that he as a father had let us down. And I feel I'm a lucky one because I genuinely think I know why. And there are so many people out there that never get those answers, but you still have to try and find some peace with it, because otherwise it will just destroy you.
I think Prince William said to you that often many unanswered questions remain, and you've obviously taken the sort of attitude to try and answer those questions because, as you say, you wouldn't have probably been able to carry on in the way you did yourself. And of course, you had a young family, you know, Holly and Isaac, hopefully too young to really understand what was happening. But I'm guessing you had to put a very brave face on, Rhian, and carry on as best you could.
Having children at this time was so difficult still because you have to keep going for them. So it wasn't easy. But when I look back, I am unbelievably grateful that I had them there, because even though mum and dad did move in with me for nearly 2 years, which was just phenomenal really and way above and beyond, I still had to get up every morning, however I felt, to get them dressed. And I had to put them to bed every night before falling apart again. And I had to take them out eventually. It took me a long time, but I had to, because otherwise, what kind of childhood would they have had? So even though it was horrible and I resented it, and that sadly I resented them a lot in those early days, I look back and just think they'll never understand how they really saved me.
Well, it sounds like they did save you, and it sounds like your mum and dad and your family were incredible. But the impact, I think, of suicide, Rhian, is really far-reaching, isn't it?
I think nobody realises how anything affects them until they've been through it. And I'd never experienced grief before. I'd never experienced any kind of problems with my mental health. And I certainly hadn't experienced losing anyone through suicide. It's what you see on the TV. It's what you see on the news. It doesn't happen to you. And when it happens, you're affected, of course. Your immediate family are affected. But you soon find out when you start speaking to people and coming out of the house, how everyone's lives who knew Paul, knew us, or even didn't know us but heard about it, were affected. You know, and I think that ripple effect, it has to be looked at, because it's not just the immediate family that need that support. It's who else is affected. You know, his friends were here the weekend and Paul died on the Monday. And they, I know, every day think the same as me. What did we miss? I shouldn't have gone home. We should have stayed. And Paul would never, ever have wanted to leave these kind of feelings with any of us, which is why it doesn't make sense. But so many people are affected. Teachers of the children in nursery, you know, the postman. We had a cleaner at the time who never came back. And all of these people are learning about this horrendous tragedy, and it affects their lives as well.
And I think as a nation, we don't really deal with grief very well. I don't think we talk about it. It's something that until recently hasn't been talked about in schools. We will all at some point lose somebody. One hopes that it would be somebody more age appropriate and towards the end of a very long and hopefully fulfilling life. But suicide's something I still feel that it's a bit of a taboo and people don't really talk about it. And yet, particularly with men, the figures are startling, aren't they?
It's just staggering. You know, it's the biggest killer of men between sort of 35 and 45 now. It's just something that we need to talk about before it's too late. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about the days we're struggling. Let's not be ashamed of it. But it's there, you know, after losing Paul, it's 13 years. Okay, so that's a while ago. There was some real shame of people who knew him, embarrassment. People were angry with him. And yes, I've been angry with him a bit over the time because he's missed out on so much. But there's just so much conversation that needs having, but also the fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of what can you talk about, what you can't talk about. For instance, we didn't think we could have him a funeral in a church because he'd taken his own life. And people actually asked me that. And there's such a stigma around it. There was a church not far from here. Last year, I asked if we could hold a bereavement forum there. And Vicar Chaplain asked, will you be talking about suicide? And we said, well, we'll be talking about bereavement from suicide, and they wouldn't allow us to hold it there. That's in 2024, and you just think we've still got such a long way to go. And I just think it's just unfair because he was obviously so traumatized and nobody was there to reach out to him.
I think another adjective sometimes I've heard people say in the same breath as suicide is it being selfish. And I just find that very difficult to understand. I'm sure there wasn't a selfish bone in Paul's body. And I'm sure it's not selfish. If you are at that level of despair and that's the option, I don't think it's very helpful to say it's selfish because somebody's at the lowest point of their life.
For anybody to be able to comment on it means they have never, ever been in that position because they're still here today. I just think that Paul was the kindest person who wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone consciously put his children and me and his family through this. There's no way. And I just think for anyone to comment on that has no understanding, has never been through it or experienced it, and maybe needs just to learn a little bit more about it in case there are people around them who are struggling. And that just really isn't a helpful comment at all.
It's not, is it? And I think I heard you on one of the interviews say that after you lost George and Paul, some people, some neighbours or people you knew would cross the road to avoid coming and having a chat, perhaps because they were nervous of what to say to you. That's quite hard, isn't it?
It's really hard. It changes you massively to the point where I've had to have psychiatric help. I've had to have some support over the time, not around my grief, really. Related, yes, but not about my grief, because I do cry and I do miss them. But that's actually quite straightforward. What I've struggled the most with is the abandonment. When George died and when Paul died, why nobody came. Was it because I was a bad person? Did I bring this on myself? Was there something wrong with me and my family? That self-worth just went down the toilet. And then you pluck the courage to go out and people see you and turn their back on you when all you want them to do is put their arms around you. They don't even have to say very much. And then family members, your best friends, people who you needed, just walk away and never come back. And this isn't just my family. You hear this all the time from people who have been bereaved, who are struggling. And you can't be angry about it. You've got to think that maybe it's because they just didn't understand. But when you go to Tesco and you see people walking away from you, that's hard.
Yeah, that's very, very hurtful. The grant or the funding that the Royal Foundation has announced for the National Suicide Prevention Network, what hopes do you have for that network, Rhian? What are the main things that need doing now so that these conversations can be had and that it will transform prevention? What do you think needs doing?
It's going to be difficult to find that starting point. So we're part now of a network who will be meeting regularly to start discussing how we move forward with this and that funding. It's about bringing people together from across the 4 nations because there are some great pockets of great work going on, and it's finding out what's working and what's not. It's also looking at the cause and getting to the root of why this is happening to so many men, especially, but also what are we going to do to stop this from happening or reduce the numbers? I actually think a lot of this is not going to need money. This is around encouraging talking. How we do that is another matter. It's easy for me to say, you must talk, you must open up. I am a talker. I open up, and I opened up very quickly afterwards. It's not easy. When I say it, I'm not saying it's easy because it's not. So it's trying to encourage these. How can we encourage people to open up and talk before it's too late? How are we going to make sure that the mental health of people in this country is taken seriously? How are we going to get them to be able to access support when needed? When are we going to get people to access crisis support? So there is a lot of work to do that's not going to happen quickly. But the very first thing we needed to do was talk about it. And we've been doing that. And the video that went out, we sort of knew that it would be of interest, but I've had so many messages from people who've either lost a loved one through suicide or have been in dark places and have just thanked us for having the conversation and saying the word suicide. It's the first step.
I think when that film went out, almost instantly it had 4.5 million views on Instagram alone. So just thinking that you sitting at your table, you know, with your mum's baking in your kitchen, which was desperately clean. I'm not suggesting, Rhian, your kitchen isn't normally clean, but I know mine would be absolutely sparkling if Prince William came for tea. And I'm sure yours was too. But it's wonderful to think that those short clips and the fact that just very naturally Prince William got a bit choked up, that makes probably the rest of us realise, you know, he's just another human being who feels pain. He did a fantastic job, I think, as beginning to open up that conversation. I was walking through a local shopping centre about a year ago, and my children are teenage. There was an exhibition and party balloons, and each balloon represented a young person who'd taken their own life. And the age that they were about to reach was on those balloons. And it was everything from 17 to 23, and there were thousands of them. And so suicide is also very, very common amongst really young people now, isn't it? So we have to get to the root of what's causing it.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. The amount of families we see at Tuish now whose children have taken their own lives, ranging from the age of 12 upwards. It's just awful. And as we've touched upon, that grieving process is going to be so, so difficult and unique as well. And you need to have that support around you. So when I talk about it with my children, they're very open in school about it, which is a great thing. So they've never come home and told me they've been picked on. When all of it goes out on this wasn't the first time I've been on the TV, and I always speak to them beforehand and check they're okay with that happening. And we're going to talk about this, that. And they're like, that's fine. And I'm like, yeah, but what about your friends? Are you okay about that? And they're very much, Mum, they know it's fine. No one's going to say anything. And they don't. So I'm hoping that this younger generation coming through who have learnt a lot more about mental health than certainly I did at school and have an understanding of these consequences of this. Let's hope that we can try and reduce these numbers by, educating the younger children around suicide and mental health.
The interview was around World Mental Health Day. Is usually mental health, the person's mental health at the time, is that usually at the root or always at the root of suicide?
It tends to be, yes. But there's also a lot of people potentially are just, don't plan for it to happen. Some of these children that we have had at the charity, a lot of it, we honestly don't think these children have thought that they were going to be able to complete this. We have had a lot of older children, young adults who potentially have been drinking, or there's been alcohol and obviously drug or cocaine abuse and, a lot of this as well. So it does come down to mental health on a lot of occasions, but there are other contributing factors as well.
It seems a bit of a silly question to ask what inspired you to start Tuish, because it's really clear that you didn't feel supported. Paul wasn't supported by professionals at the time. But I do want to ask in your words, Rhian, what was that tipping point where you thought, actually, I need to do something and I want to help other people?
No father should ever feel the only way out is by walking out of their home and leaving their 2 and 3-year-old and their wife behind. That shouldn't happen. And I very quickly thought that we'd been failed and let down. We really, really had, and Paul had been failed and let down. So I decided just to set up a little fund really for the local community who'd been phenomenal for us. I wanted to help the local hospital where George died because it just wasn't equipped. But very suddenly, families were just reaching out to me saying, you're not alone, this happened to me. And we just left the hospital with nothing. And my child died and we had nothing. And I tried to go back to work. I was a teacher at the time and I absolutely loved my job. But I suddenly started just feeling I had to do something for them because they couldn't just die at this age and be gone and forgotten. That's where Tuish started. It was really my passion around making sure that if a child died under sudden circumstances, the family were offered a lifeline. And some families didn't need it, but that offer was always there. So when they left, they knew that someone was going to call them the next day. And 13 years on, we're helping thousands and thousands of families with that phone call within 48 hours of the death to say that you're not alone. And I genuinely believe that phone call could have saved my husband's life.
Tell me a bit about the work that To Wish does. Who is it really aimed at, Rhian? Who are you helping? And how did it grow from you and that desire to not let any other family suffer like you did?
I think buckets of stubbornness and determination and stalking the right people, because it was just unbelievable when I started going out to people, and I literally just got my mum and dad to drive me around hospitals, really, and just go in and find out. There just seemed to be nothing for anybody who'd lost anybody at that time. It was unbelievable how families were losing loved ones in A&E departments and never hearing from anyone again. And sadly, I know that still happens for those who lose perhaps older adults. But I started just thinking about, firstly, the space in the hospitals, making sure there was a private space for families, which we didn't have. And as an organisation, we've done many, many rooms now for families to use before, during or after a significant incident. We brought in memory boxes for families to have handprints and things like that with staff to do with them at the hospital. And we have counselling ongoing for anyone who is affected by the sudden death of a child or a young adult up to the age of 25. But my biggest passion was making sure that families didn't have to come find us, that we would find them. So we have an immediate support pathway, which is really unique, that as long as the families consent at the hospital, information is sent to us around the family. And we actually promise to phone the family within 48 hours of the loss. I never thought we'd be able to get that, little old me, just passionate, but nobody really knew who I was at this point. But that immediate support pathway now is bringing us in over 500 families a year from all the places we work now, where we then reach out and we go out to their home, we put the kettle on and we just talk to them about their child. It's not counselling, it's just being there for them. And that probably is the part of To Wish I'm most proud of.
What sort of feedback do you get from parents and the people that To Wish really helps, Rhian?
They thank us massively for what we're doing. I've had some really incredible letters and emails and cards thanking us for saving their lives. I've had emails from dads asking me never to be angry with Paul because they've been in that position and got very close to never coming back. But I also feel it's a privilege for us to be able to come into their homes when they are at their worst possible time of their life and to be able to just give them that glimmer. We can't change what's happened. We can't make it better. But what we can do is just help them, give them hope that one day things will be okay, a very different okay. But actually these feelings will ease, and we just want to be there to help them through the hardest days.
How big has the charity got now, Rhian? And I know you're based in Wales, but do the people you help, are they all in Wales or are you now nationwide?
So up to last year, we were an all Wales charity. So we had a consistent approach across the whole country, which is what we really, really wanted. So we then dipped our toes across the border. We didn't realise how quick that would happen. We thought, new organisation coming in from Wales. But we doubled our referrals near enough last year by going into the bordering counties, so Cheshire and Worcestershire and Gloucestershire and Herefordshire and Avon and Somerset. And this year we expanded into Merseyside, Devon and Cornwall, Wiltshire, Hampshire and Dorset. So we're growing really, really quickly. I've got over 50 members of staff now, hundreds of volunteers, hundreds of counsellors. I know it sounds wrong to say it, but I absolutely love what I do. It's bigger than just Paul and George now. I'm so glad that this little boy with sticky out ears and his dad have been able to live on and make a difference, even though they're no longer here.
In a way, has it perhaps been a bit cathartic for you, giving you a real sense of purpose? Because we've interviewed, a few people who, out of a tragic situation, have created something amazing. The lady that springs to mind, I know, is a friend of yours, Linda Magistris, who's just received the OBE, and she runs the Good Grief Trust. And, out of tragically losing her husband at quite a young age, similar to you, just there was no one there to help other than a GP with sleeping tablets or antidepressants. I just wonder how it's helped you. You're clearly very proud of To Wish.
I think it saved me as well, because I've always been a very positive person, and I don't think I could have ever lived in this dark hole because I don't know how I would have coped. So it's probably became an obsession, borderline obsession in the beginning, which has tapered off a little bit. Because when you're passionate about something, everybody listening who's perhaps self-employed or have got their own business, it's hard. It's really hard to switch off. But it gave me a purpose. It gave me something else to get out of bed for. I've met the most phenomenal people. I've met other bereaved parents who don't realize how much they've helped me. But also I've met phenomenal people working in the field of child death who I'm really proud to be working with. And I think it just changed my outlook on life in many ways as well.
And will you keep in touch with Prince William? I'm guessing you will.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've met him quite a few times. I've had quite a few letters. I've had a letter since. And would you believe, this is hot off the press, the Tupperware turned up today in the post.
So just explain what the Tupperware is.
So we sent him home with my mum's new Tupperware box with the Welsh cakes in. And as he drove off, people will have heard probably at the end of the video that was shown, the film, I turned to my mum and say, I can't believe he's gone off with your Tupperware. Because she was really proud it fitted nicely in her freezer. So obviously then, when I was doing TV interviews and radio interviews, everyone, and I mean everyone, mentioned the Tupperware. So I will be telling the world later that it's now come back. It's in a jiffy bag with Buckingham Palace postal stamp and my mum's Tupperware boxes in it.
Oh my goodness. I wonder if she'll ever use it again. She'll probably put it on a cake stand or something. Yeah, exactly. It's a piece of royal memorabilia. I feel so chuffed that, Rhian, that as soon as I sent a message actually to Wish to invite you onto the Convex Conversation, straight away you said yes. And I think it's really, really important to get out and hear your story. And you've paid tribute to Paul and George beautifully. You've got To Wish in their memory. But I think it's really important to show that you've managed to create a happy life too. You've got two wonderful sounding children, Holly and Isaac. And I'm sure it'll inspire a lot of people to talk, because it's about talking, isn't it? It's about getting out there and trying to say how you feel.
You must talk. Talk to a friend, talk to anyone who's there to listen. You'd be surprised. People want to help. People really, really do. And if you know someone who's struggling or you're supporting somebody, never underestimate how that cup of tea can make a difference, because it's not easy for people to open up. It's not easy to support people who are struggling either, but just taking that bit of time and being there and making that person feel heard and valued and that they matter is a huge, huge step for them.
It's been really nice to talk to you, Rhian. If there's anything that we can help you with the charity, just shout out. And I'm really glad that we've broken the news that the Tupperware is back. It is. Excellent.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. You've been listening to Rhian Mannings MBE, founder of To Wish, whose interview with Prince William went viral recently. It's shone a light on such an important topic, with millions of people watching around the time of that interview release, which was around World Mental Health Day. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com, or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. Join me then.